it's amazing. And I really appreciate that you sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
So it seems like he really helped you getting out of it. So it was a lot of like talk therapy and walking you through it and just being by your side together with your friends, with your family who supported you throughout. And the question that I'm now having is there a moment actually when you knew, okay, I think I'm out of it, or I'm out of it? Because when you have a broken arm, you get it fixed. At one point, it's not broken anymore. You can do sports again. You can work out again. And okay, I'm fine. How is it with depression?
It's interesting because I've asked that question before too. I think it's almost like when you stop asking, am I still depressed? I think it's kind of when you know you're not in it anymore, because it's so subtle and so gradual. It's a little different from like the arm situation. It's so subtle, and because it's a slow process. I knew that after I went to that year, it was going to be a year or two of like a recovery after hitting that low. And I definitely relapsed into a little bit of depression my first year out of college too, and that was a tough part of the journey. But like what I learned from that Christian counselor was to really lean into my relationship with God, which really ministered to me in a lot of ways. And it was a slow, gradual process. I wish I could say I had just this climatic moment where like, an angel of the Lord came and healed my soul and I was totally fine. It didn't work that way. It wasn't healed in an instant. It was a long, gradual process, but it was a process of trusting and surrendering and learning and kind of reinventing myself. And my perspective was changing in that process too, to understand that it's okay to suffer in life. And once I realized that suffering is a part of life, it gave me a lot of hope and it maybe got me excited. It gave me a sense of pride again, but to answer your question, I think it's a slow, gradual process. And I think once you finally stop asking the question, you start noticing you're present, then you realize, wow, maybe it's over. Maybe it's gone.
That's a good point. Once you stop asking yourself, "Hey, am I actually present?" Then you should know it's over. It's
Yeah.
a very good way to describe it. So I read the other day that I think it's according to the National Institute of Mental Health, and they're saying that 70% of the people who had a depressive episode are likely to have another one. So is there a moment, or are you still afraid of, okay, I don't want to fall back into this place again?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's such an interesting question too. And I'm not surprised by a statistic, because I think, again, like I feel like depression is a symptom of an underlying, there's a reason for it. You know what I mean? There's definitely a deeper seated reason. And I'm sure we're probably gonna get to the thought of like psychotherapy and medication, because that's a part of the conversation too. But like, I think you could go through it and then maybe re-experience it, maybe because that underlying root cause might not hasn't maybe been healed or cleansed yet, And I know for me right now, I don't have that fear for it to happen again, just like where I'm presently at. I think a lot of it is because of where my faith is and relationship with God is, because it's like my whole perspective has just changed on depression. And it's just, I welcome it. I understand it. And it's a part. I know I'm going to go through seasons again in life that are going to be harder than I've ever experienced. But like, I know that it's going to be a process and a path. Now, can that grieving process be a month? Can it be 2 years? Maybe, but I don't think it's more so a product of being a person who has depression. I think it's more so being a product of being a human being and a human condition, right? Because we're all going to walk through life and we're going to have traumatic experiences. But then again, I think it's hard because I want to be sensitive to other people that might not be aware of things they experience. And because I think that's another part of depression too. It's like you have no reason and no explanation for it. And maybe you can't think of any trauma you've experienced in your life. It gets complicated because that's when the spirituality aspect comes with it too, because sometimes it can be generational and not just simply like, it could be genetic in certain ways, but sometimes it's not just, biochemistry, but it's just the spiritual things that pass from generation to generation. And I know, not that I'm trying to jump ahead to spirituality, but I think spirituality is left a lot out of the conversation when it comes to mental health. And I think it's a disjustice because we only know maybe 10% of the brain, so, and I know science is definitely one aspect to helping with mental health, but I think spirituality needs to be a part of that conversation. There's a great neuroscientist, her name's Caroline Leaf. She talks a lot about like mental health and stuff too. And she talks a lot about brain chemistry but yeah, so I'm going on, but to answer your question back on the depression piece, it's different. It's, I expect it to be challenged again, but I don't think it would be like I'm at depression again. I mean, I experience life to be rough again, just, you never know what's going to happen. Each one you say, so many different things could happen in the future. So
yeah, and it sounds like, to me, hey, I experienced it before. I know it will come back eventually, but I know it will end. I know it will pass. There's like this light at the end of the tunnel where I know, okay, this is only a phase, and I will go through it, and I will heal.
Yeah.
And this is probably the difference to when you're actually in depression the first time, that you don't even have the vision of, I don't know if I can ever heal.
Yeah, no, you think you're there stuck forever. And I think that's when the hopelessness comes, because you see no light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's important, though, because I think I think you could kind of come out of a season of depression and think you're healed and maybe not, and then it could come back and it could be just as worse. So I think it is really important to really go through counseling and go through that emotional healing process to really identify what is causing it. There's a cause. There's something there. And I think the best advice I tell people with it, and I want to be sensitive to people's different faith backgrounds, but I think relationship with God, communion with God it's what's changed my life, and it's what's worked in me to get me where I'm at. And I know it could help a lot of people.
Yes, because it's so hard to cover it all in like under an hour. But I just trying to give people a chance to listen to your story, because it's just in the end such a wonderful story to share, because you eventually defeated it, and you're this spiritual and positive guy. And to go back to your point, it is true. And I saw this TED talk from Johann Hari, and he said most of the time people think of depression as only this chemical imbalance in our brain. But what they forget is that it has something to do with spirituality and psychology. Actually, most cases are more in this corner than actually the chemical imbalance. And this would lead me to the question of, okay, how do we actually treat it? Do we go psychotherapy only? Are we treating it with medication? Because, as you know, I'm doing this research now in terms of for comedians for my book.
Yeah.
And when I was looking up Sarah Silverman, she even said, yeah, I think medication is prescribed to people way, way too easy. And and when I sometimes talk to people who suffer depression but who are on medication, I have the feeling they get annoyed very easily when you say, okay, like, don't you want to get off of medication eventually? Like, aren't the side effects too bad, or what's the process here? Because for them, it's actually a way to live again, and sometimes they don't see a reason to actually get off of medication.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on it, and it's tough because I want to be sensitive and respect it, because it is it's hard, and when you're in it and you're hurting it, it's hard, and you're going to pursue any avenue that's going to help you. And I can speak from and again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychiatrist. So this is my personal opinion from what I've experienced, and I hope it's encouraging to some. But from what I've learned, and I've been on medication, and it's very easy. And, I met with a psychiatrist once, and within 10 minutes after that session, I already had, antidepressants in my hands. And I was like, wow, this is easy. But like, what else is there? You know what I mean? And the way I think it's important, because if we only approach mental health from the perspective of a chemical imbalance, I feel like there's so much more that we're not addressing. Because I don't know about you, and I had this mindset, like, I did not want to live with depression. I did not, but I didn't get the right away, because I thought that once I got diagnosed with it, I'd have hope. I thought that once my identity would be, oh, I just have clinical depression, that's who I am as Steve Mezzacappa, that's who I'm going to be forever, maybe I'd feel better. But it didn't happen. It became worse. And I think, and I want to be sensitive here, but I think sometimes there's an identity that we could take on as being a victim, and thinking some hope and healing can come from that mindset. And I want to be sensitive, because I know it could hurt some, but I'm trying to speak this in love, because why take that on? Because welcome it, because we don't need to be a victim to our biology. You know what I mean? Like, there is hope. Think about it this way. I mean, even when you look at college students, I think the stat is 1 in 4 college students have a diagnosable mental illness. So if you're telling me that 25% of college students have a diagnosable mental illness, that 25% of college students have messed up brain chemistry, what hope is there in the world then? So, because it's deeper than that. And what I really believe that the depression and the issues, and again, there's the world of mental health, there's so many layers, like schizophrenia, bipolar. There's other medical categories out there that really do require medication. But if we're looking under the umbrella of anxiety and depression particularly, I like to think that the chemical imbalance that happens, I believe, is the result of the depression, right? How do you prove that this imbalance causing depression versus the depression causing the imbalance, right? Because what I believe, and my faith is so incredibly important to me, and I hope others will be open to a faith mindset and understanding who we are as human beings, right? Because we're not just flesh and brain tissue and that's it, because then what hope is there, right? But if we look at ourselves as having a spirit, a soul, and a body, and within our soul comprising of our mind, our feelings, right, and our choices, which is mental health, our soul, right? And that's separate from our brain. So if I explain it this way, I believe like your soul and your brain are two separate entities. Your brain's tied physically, there's chemistry there, there's physical components tied to your body, but your soul is separate. Like your thoughts are separate. Now, there's science and neuroscience that talks about the meshing of the two, where your thoughts and feelings could end up becoming actual brain matter and stuff, but they're separate, right? Because if you cure the chemical imbalance without curing the soul, are you really having healing happening, right? And that's why I think it's so important to understand, and that's why I get nervous with medication, because you can just put someone on medication and just talk to them here and there, but then you start to feel good, and it's like, maybe I don't need to address the underlying things that are there. And I hope I'm being sensitive about this with some, because I know people that take medication and items like that, but I think it's important to understand that there's deeper things there, because, if you just heal only in medicine, you're never healing the thought and feeling aspect. And a good example is, let's say you dealt with emotional trauma growing up, and when you get older, you fall into a depression because of things you experienced in your life, and you treat it with just a medicine. The medicine might re-regulate your neurons and your transmitters and your chemical, but the medicine is not going to change your perception, perspective, and thoughts on the experience that happened. And that's where God comes in, because there's a beauty in redemption and salvation and grace, where even something bad that's happened to us, through the power and grace of God, we could rewire the way we look at it and perceive it, interact with that experience. So instead of having the body heal the soul, we're having the soul heal the body through God. So I can go on a tangent there, but I feel strongly about it. And there's definitely situations where people need to be on medication because of the severity of it. And I'm not a therapist, but there's a lot of people that talk about it. There's a lot of neuroscientists that talk about it, and there's hybrid models to it. You don't need to be on medication forever. I'm also not saying to never use it, because it's medicine. I think there's some good to it too. But I think it's having an honest conversation with your doctor, your goals, and really knowing where you're at. You know what I mean? Like having a plan. Like I still want to talk about it. I still want to maybe work towards leaning off. Maybe I'm going to stay on. But, I think it varies from person.
Yeah, and I'm so happy for you, because it feels like you really found your way, and you really found the phase-based approach of this healing process that is working for you. And I think this is one component that people should definitely consider if they haven't considered it yet, healing or defeating depression. Because again, going back to just this chemical imbalance is one thing, just looking at it from a biological perspective, but then the sociological aspect of it, how we live in society, what the values of society are, and how we perceive it in our lives, and then maybe resulting from this going into depression. And also our own mindset and mindfulness, and of course the spirituality and the faith behind it. I think there's so much more to explore still, because this is something science can hardly capture, but we're getting there. But it's just so crucial to use it and make use of it to help people.
Yeah, and I want to clarify too, because I mentioned I was on medication in college, and then I went off of it towards the end of college. And in my year out of college, I went through a depression again. And I thought of going back on it, and I decided not to. So there is hope, and I feel confident that God brought a lot of healing without the medication for me.
Wait, so you said you suffered depression once, and then you had the psychotherapy, you eventually defeated it, and you were mentioning that it came back?
It came back my second year, like probably a year out of college. I wrestled with it again. Yeah. Okay, I don't know if I missed it earlier.
But for the second time, then, so first time you were on medication, you used it, eventually got off medication. For the second time you said, okay, no, I will do this without.
That's pretty much what happened. And I say the second time, but they kind of blend together in a way. Like this summer was kind of like a limbo. Like I feel like I had more time, so I didn't notice it. I don't think it was fully healed yet. I think it was kind of like, so I was on medicine that last year of college. And then by spring, I was gaining a lot of weight, and it just wasn't doing well for me. I just got off of it. And I was doing like okay. It wasn't great yet. And then I kind of hit like a dark place again, like a year out. And at that point, I decided to not, use medicine as an option. It's because that year I grew so much in my relationship with God, and I knew that He could provide for me and provide healing to me. Not to sound weird in that, but and that's why I sought Him. You know what I mean? And He really came through and provided for me in that time.
Yeah, totally. And it's just beautiful to see that you actually, and to give the people who are listening a little background, we met in the author program. So we're about to, both of us, write a book. And your topic is actually super tied to the experience that you were going through. Because when you were mentioning that you're battling depression through this faith-based approach. This is something also you heavily cover in your book, which is a good thing, right? So tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. Yeah, so I guess, and I kind of mentioned too, like I hit like this, what caused the onset of depression was following my passion in life, right? Following the dreams I had for myself of building skyscrapers, being popular. I did all those things, and when it led to unfulfillment is kind of when I hit that rock bottom and depression piece. And in my book, I talk a lot about passion and talk about purpose, but I really talk about passion as not being something that you follow, but something that you do and something you uncover with inside of you. And I mentioned a lot in this conversation about the soul being made up of like your thoughts, your feelings, and your choices. And in this book, I go into detail as kind of redefining passion as the fire inside of you and how it's something that we want to cultivate, something we want to foster, something we want to develop, right? Because and I mentioned earlier too, like I was kind of like a ticking time bomb. I experienced some anxiety and depression leading up to when life got really challenging for me. But I like to explain the level of passion I was living is kind of like a red passion, kind of a burn, like it's still powerful, intense, and could create some success, but it's burning out, right? And I like to tell people a good passion, healthy passion, is kind of like this blue flame that you want for yourself, right? And I think one of the ways, like I mentioned, I think what got me to the struggle was I spent the majority of my life medicating some circumstances I experienced growing up, right? I was medicating myself, my soul wounds, with experiences and success and achievement. I thought it was all great. Like I didn't get mixed up into the wrong crowds. So I thought I was a good kid, but I was still medicating myself with things I thought would heal me, when really we need to really have God be our director, and God be our God. So that's all I talk about in my book. It's entitled Passion and Purpose, Fire Within, Building a Life of Fulfillment, Destiny, and Impact. And it's really interesting. There's a verse in the book of Matthew when Jesus talks about the wise builder and the foolish builder. And he talks about the foolish builder when he builds a house not planted on his, in the sand, which is not, according to his word. When the rain comes, the house just falls away, right? But when the house is built on a rock, which is his word and his direction, relationship with it for our lives, is when the house could weather any storm. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to help people kind of understand that if like living a life of fulfillment and destiny and impact, it's not about the dream job, the dream career, being the dream stand-up comedian. It's not about the achievement, but it's about the present moment, and it's about where you're at with God. Because if you get to a place in a relationship with God where He is your source of joy and fulfillment, everything else that comes after that is like no matter what the challenges come, you won't burn out because God has you. You know what I mean? He's supporting you. He's your caretaker, right? Because when we leave our profession or our relationships to be our caretaker, they're going to let us down. Like no person's perfect. The same thing like relationships, right? If I go into a relationship expecting this person to heal me or be my rock, they're going to let me down. And the same thing with profession. Professions will let us down. There's a lot to talk about. I feel like I'm missing a bunch of things here, but I think the message of the book is for us to take responsibility of how we think, how we feel, and how we choose, and how we don't have to be victims to our biology. We don't need to be victims to the mental illnesses that we struggle. I think they're a part of life, and even the word passion itself actually means to suffer. And a lot of people don't ever talk about that. Culture says go follow your passion. What's really saying is go follow your suffering. So to anyone that's following the call and life is tough, don't worry, it's part of it. But
I love it, Stephen. It's a beautiful way to actually wrap this up. I could have talked with you for hours about this topic, but I really also want to be respectful with your time. But looking back now and you sharing your story, it's just a beautiful thing that you're putting this in the book form. So that it's a very, very relatable way. It's a very authentic way, and I think it's just a beautiful way to do. And it also gives other people hope, as much as I hope this podcast episode will give people who maybe experience this right now, give hope.
Yeah. And if there's one thing I could just say, I would encourage any of your listeners, anyone that comes across the show, like reach out to me on social media, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, because I love to talk with you and just help, because I do care. And I'm personally very passionate about this issue because I believe that there's hope. I believe there's healing. I believe there's restoration there. And I think when it comes to depression, it's not to smile about, but I think there's a beautiful thing happening. You might seem like the world's crashing down, but what's ahead of you is where you're meant to go. Sometimes we need to die to ourselves to really walk into where we're meant to go, to kind of uncover that destiny that's deep within us, right? Sometimes we need to unbecome to become what we're meant to be. And I would love to talk with anybody that's just struggling, because there's hope. And I just want to pay it forward and just help someone, because I've been there.
With that, my friend, I thank you so much, and take care, buddy.
Thanks, Felix. Great talking to you, man.